We're sort of you. Let me explain. We're officially non-sectarian, non-creedal, all welcome, no set of sacredly inspired guidelines, but here we are, and this candle brings us together. If I stood out in the rain night, my only light a candle a million miles away, would you lay down your fire as I raised mine? Would you not kill again? And oh, when you're near me, oh my love, oh my joy, there's nothing ever to weary me, oh my darling one. Coming to us live from the road, our best friends Magpie. Their names are Terry Leonino and Greg Artzner, and they've been doing good music trouble for over 50 years together, and it's always a wonderful, magnificent thing to have them to grace, beautify, and magic our space here in Copley Square. Good morning, Greg and Terry.
Good morning, Dean.
Good morning, we feel the same thing about you.
We're all just on top of each other.
That's right.
We hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for doing this work.
Okay.
So here's a little song for you.
Are we starting off with a song then, Dean?
Yes.
All right, here's a song. All right.
Okay, so we heard this theme of today has something to do with
Cost of living.
Cost of living, and here's a little song about money.
What key are you in?
The key of G, Terry.
Oh, now you do.
Oh yeah, that sounds like. Follow the money from the oil can, from Iraq, Nigeria, and Kazakhstan. Follow the money from the tank, the halls of Congress where it buys the votes. Follow the money till it makes you sick and you slip and you slide on a thick oil slick. Follow the money. Follow the money. Follow from the oil can, from Iraq, Nigeria, Kazakhstan. Follow the money from the tanker boats to the halls of Congress where it buys the votes. Follow the money till it makes you sick and you slip and you slide the oil. Follow the money. Follow the money. Our addiction to oil is at the core, guzzling and guzzling more and more. Keep on drilling the earth. How many barrels of life worth? How long will it take for us to see? Somebody owns the powers that be. Follow the money. Follow the money. Follow the money from the oil can, Iraq, Nigeria, to Kazakhstan. Follow the money from the tanker boats to the halls of Congress where it buys the votes. Follow the money till it makes you sick and slide. The oil sick of the money. Follow the money. Which politicians stand to gain with big oil money in their campaign? They give big tax subsidies out for empty off. BP and Halliburton don't have to comply. They got the very best Congress oil money can buy. Follow the money. Follow the money. Follow the money from the oil can, from Iraq, Nigeria, to Kazakhstan. Follow the money from the tanker boats to the halls of Congress where it buys the votes. Follow the money from where it's right in the office of the president. Follow the money. Follow the money. It's time for all nations to rearrange. It's time for a global oil change. To save this planet, it's not time for racial oil state. Follow the money. Follow the money. Follow from solar power, free energy every daylight hour. Money to power that's green. We don't need no power machine. Follow the money from the halls of state. From the power of oil, gotta separate. Follow the money. Follow the money. Follow the money from the oil can. From Iraq, Nigeria, and Kazakhstan. Follow the money from the tanker boats to the halls of Congress where it buys the votes. Follow the money till it makes you instead by the piccolo slave. Follow the money. Follow the money. Follow the money. Follow the money.
Thank you, Terry and Greg. Armar, is this
Thank you very much.
Is this one live? It's a
that
funny
came through
thing
without any
that I purchased a T-shirt that says "Follow the Money," and it came from Sabby Sabs podcast. I was looking for it this morning, and I
Seriously?
had such a
That's
big pile of
wonderful.
T-shirts I couldn't find it to wear this morning. But if you get a chance to go to the YouTube channel for Sabby Sabs, you can find your own T-shirt there and other merchandise as well. So anyway, welcome and thank you, Terry and Greg. That was the perfect song for what we're talking about this morning. I'm going to go through just a few quick things. The first thing is like a sandwich of this program. First last week and then next week. Last week was just this wonderful program about Francis Perkins. And we just really learned a whole lot. And we had this enormous display of pop-up banners that were the history of her life that was brought to us by AFL-CIO representative, and Ruth Monzel came down from Maine, and you can check it out. It's on our YouTube channel. And now we go to next week, which is another really remarkable thing we're doing in the eve of the elections. Who is that? Oh, in the eve of the elections. And that is a reading of the 1936 novel turned play that's called It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. I was looking for a copy of it. It's sort of a part of our DNA. It turns out that it was read here at Community Church in 1936. There was not a complete reading of it, but a commentary on the same thing, 1936, when the same sort of thing, the looming threat of fascism was on the horizon. And an eerie thing that somebody mentioned on late night TV recently was that there is a Trump Madison Square Garden rally coming up soon. I can't imagine what the rationale is behind that, except that maybe it's a copy of the 1939 Nazi Madison Square Garden rally. Look at that on the YouTube, and it's a scary thing. And a funny thing I'll also mention is that rally in 1939 was disrupted by a man who came running on stage. He was a Jewish plumber. And he went right at the speaker, whoever it was, and was immediately grabbed by all these guards. It sort of was it's all caught on this film. Another disruptor at that same event was Sinclair Lewis's wife, who was named Dorothy Thompson, who is somebody we know about a little bit at the church as well. Dorothy was an important journalist between the wars. She was the first American journalist to interview Adolf Hitler, and was, as soon as her piece came out on the interview, she was summarily ejected from Germany and forever. Sound familiar? kill the messenger. But Dorothy Thompson, Sinclair's wife, spoke here in the 50s. We have a number of books about her if you're interested in finding out about that. So that's the sandwich. Next week, It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. And last week, Ruth Monsell. And this week, of course, Sabby Sabs. Couple of readings real quick. This is a favorite, Eduardo Galeano. The book Children of the Days, Uruguayan favorite author of mine. He writes this book. It kind of reminds me of my parents who were evangelical missionaries. They had a daily light, and we'd read whatever the reading for that date was after dinner. Around the table. This is a little bit different from that, but it has an entry for every day, and I actually want to read two entries because they're related. October 26th is called War for Drugs. After 20 years of cannon fire and thousands upon thousands of dead Chinese, Queen Victoria sang her victory song. China, which had banned drugs, opened its door to the opium sold by British merchants. While the imperial palaces burned, Prince Gong signed the surrender in 1860. It was a victory for freedom of commerce, that is. And then October 27th, war against drugs. In 1986, President Ronald Reagan took up the spear that Richard Nixon had raised a few years previous, and the war against drugs received a multi-million-dollar boost. From that point on, profits escalated for drug traffickers and the big money laundering banks. More powerful drugs came to kill twice as many people as before. Every week a new jail opens in the United States, since the country with the most drug addicts always has room for a few addicts more. Afghanistan, a country invaded and occupied by the United States, became the principal supplier of nearly all the world's heroin. And the war against drugs, which turned Colombia into one big U.S. military base, is turning Mexico into a demented slaughterhouse. Eduardo Galeano. The other thing I wanted to read was I got to by a sort of circuitous path. I was writing up an announcement for a show I'm doing on November 30th. I'm a musician, if you didn't know. I sing and write songs and play guitar and play with these other great players like Max Ridley and Rob Flax, who will be with me November 30th, Theodore Parker, Unitarian Church. Anyway, I was writing this description of the players, and there's so many adjectives to use, and they're all overused when you're plugging stuff, and I remembered the Tom Waits's best adjectives, Leviticusly Deuteronomous, and I described musicians as Leviticusly Deuteronomous, and like 3 people on the Facebook recognized that Tom Waits in some rap between songs saying that, and so I had to say, you're right. But it was interesting because right next to me was this Bible that I had gotten at my mother's memorial service. A lady whom Mom had counseled brought this Bible up to the front at the end of Mom's memorial. And she said, your mother gave me this Bible and I want to give it back to you. And she had a horrible story of what she had been going through, and my mother was a kind of immature therapist and counselor, and so I want to give it back to you. And it's this old Bible, and it's in Spanish, and it turned out this is a Bible that my dad, 1952, they went to Costa Rica to be missionaries, to preach the gospel. And this is the Bible that my dad, the first Bible that he had, and he was using it to learn Spanish. So it's underlined, it's got notes of all kinds, and so I went to the book of Deuteronomy to find out about Leviticusly Deuteronomous, and I started reading it, and it's basically Moses telling the children of Israel all this real estate that God had promised to them, and it was everywhere from. It mentioned Lebanon, mentioned a bunch of places that I'd have to look up to find where they are. It also mentioned all the way to the river Euphrates. So it's a wide piece of real estate, and maybe it's what 6,000 years later they're using to justify what they're doing now. Anyway, I kind of got lost interest in continuing with Deuteronomy and went straight to the one favorite passage of mine, and it happens to be in Spanish. I'm going to read just a couple verses in Spanish and then in English, if you don't mind. And 1 Corinthians 13, it's what you hear at a lot of weddings. Si yo hablase lenguas humanas y angélicas y no tengo caridad, vengo a ser como metal que resuena o símbolo que retiñe. Y si tuviese profecía y entendiese todos los misterios y toda ciencia, y si tuviese toda la fe de tal manera que traspasase los montes y no tengo amor, nada soy. Y si repartiese toda mi hacienda para dar de comer a pobres, y si entregase mi cuerpo para ser quemado, y no tengo caridad, de nada me sirve. La caridad, el amor, es sufrido, es benigno. La caridad no tiene envidia. El amor no hace sin razón, no se ensancha, no es injuriosa, no busca lo suyo, no se irrita, no piensa el mal, no se huelga de la injusticia, mas se huelga de la verdad. So I went all over Community Church looking for a Bible. That tells you a little bit about where we are. And I finally found 2 Bibles. They must have come as like complimentary. They were still wrapped in plastic. And one of their I wish I had a Trump Bible to read from. That would be kind of bizarre and fun. I took them out of their plastic. One is kind of like for kids. On the front it says, "Excellent First Bible." And then the other one is the one I'm going to choose to read because it's the large print edition, having just turned 70. And some versions used love and others used charity. And this one used charity, and I'm going to change it just to love every time I see that word. Though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and have not love, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have no love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not love, it profiteth me nothing. Love suffereth long, love is kind, love envieth not, love vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up. Love doth not behave itself unseemly, does not seek her own, is not easily provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. The first 6 verses of 1 Corinthians 13. I guess I also like it because my mother, for her birthday, when I was like 10, wanted us to memorize that verse. So let's hear from Terry and Greg. Couple of songs, if you're able.
Of course we are, and we just wanted to say that my mom also used to read that very Bible. And it's a beautiful thing about love. And speaking of love, we thought we would sing a song called "Call Them All Love Songs,"
Wow.
which we actually wrote for Pete Seeger. Pete had just died. There were things about him that we admired because he left a mark in the world of such love and such passion and such peace, and love for the environment, love for everything. So here's a song. It's called "Call Them All Love Songs." It's got a chorus, so Anybody out there wants to sing along, please do.
I call them all love songs because that is what they are. Yeah, when Pete was interviewed many, many years ago by a reporter from the Washington Post, he was asked about that term folk song, and he very candidly said, well, no, I don't really like that term folk song. I never did like that term song. And the guy said, well, but you're the quintessential folk singer, Pete. If you don't call them folk songs, then what do you call them? And this was his reply. Make sure my B string is a little... It goes like this.
I call them all love songs, 'cause that is what they are. Love, though the road be smooth or rough. Love for this crazy world of humanity. We know love alone is not enough. It's about the workers' solidarity and about their singing on the line. A song of their dream to make a better world. Like a beacon through the night, we let it shine. A hope for the planet, the home that we all share, that we may strive to heal the damage we have done. A lament about the wrong of war and standing to defy. It's a song about the peace that we have won. I call them all songs, 'cause that is what they are. Love, though the road be smooth or rough. Love for this crazy world and all humanity. Say no, love alone is not enough. It's the struggle of poor people just fighting to make it, and the greedy to take more than their share. Song for the ones who help to feed body and mind of their brothers and their sisters. Song about walking, not just talking as we go, remembering the good things that we do. A song about step with and for each other now. For we know love is not enough to see us through. I call them all love songs, that's what they are. Love, though the road be smooth or rough. Love for this crazy world and all humanity. Still we know love alone is not enough. It's about searching for the truth, and about things that are unknown. A song about freedom and the struggle that goes on. A story of the country you call. A song about the river ever flowing to the sea, from the mountains in the north forever tall. A dream of clear water and the wind's surge sails. It's a song about a song about a song. I call them all love songs, 'cause that is what they are. Love, though it be smooth or rough. Love for this crazy world and all humanity. Still we know love alone is not enough. We know love alone is not enough.
I call them all love songs. Well, here's another love song while we're at it. And we heard this song for the very first time this year, and we were really excited about it. And it actually is a few years old. It was actually written by Keb Mo and Beth Nielsen Chapman, who are pretty well-known artists. Keb Mo in particular, he's a pretty famous guy. But it'd be everywhere. And we've got a big...
We have an election coming up.
We have a big deal coming up here.
And, you know,
Just
women
wait.
need to be put in charge every once in a while, you know. And some of the most important women in our lives, like Rachel Carson, just Frida Kahlo, and just so many women, artists and musicians and dancers, and that are often overlooked in our history and in our lives, mostly because of the kind of patriarchal anxiety we seem to have.
Patriarchal anxiety. No, there's a good term for it.
So anyway, enjoy this song, and we'll try to, and you can help me put a woman in charge.
Yeah, sing along on the refrain. You'll catch it. Terry will sing it, then I'll sing it. You can sing with me. She's gonna do that.
We're gonna try it anyway.
Yeah. We just learned this, so.
In the beginning of time, man made the fire, then the wheel went from a horse to an automobile. He said the world is mine, from the mountains to the sky. He built the borders, set the walls, he won't stop till he has it all. But here we are, standing on the brink of disaster. Enough is enough is enough is enough. I know the answer. Put a woman in charge.
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 Put a woman in charge. Put a woman in charge. Time has come. We gotta turn this world around. Call the mothers, call the daughters. We need the sisters of mercy now. She'll be a hero, not a fool. She's guided by the golden rule. She's got something that men don't have. She's kind and she understands. So let the ladies do what they were born to do. Raise the vibration, make a better place for you. Put a woman in charge.
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 Put a woman in charge. Put a woman in charge. Hallelujah. We're gonna feel the magic when the girls take over. It's gonna be fantastic. Put a woman in charge.
Put a woman in charge.
Put a woman in charge. Put a woman in charge. Put a woman in charge. Put a woman in charge.
Put a woman in charge.
Put a woman in charge. Put a woman in charge. Put a woman in charge.
I love that idea. Thank you, Magpie, Greg, and Terry. I want to talk about just a couple more things before we bring our speaker up for this morning. This Saturday, we have a virtual presentation, journalist Matthew Cole, talking about a book that he wrote that's called Code Over Country, The Tragedy and Corruption of the SEAL Team 6. That's this Saturday. It's part of a regular series of programs that we do just virtually on different days of the week, and it's pretty impressive lineup that we've already had, and more coming. Norman Finkelstein will be with us in January. We're just pinning down the date, 17th, if I'm not mistaken. That's pretty final, yeah. And others as well. Can't help but mention that the Sunday in 2 weeks after the election, Richard Wolff, economist extraordinaire and probably our favorite and definitely most popular presenter, he's been willing to come and visit us repeatedly. He's almost like our new Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn, who both would speak here pretty much every year during the 80s and early 90s. Want to talk about a few books that we have several copies of that are here at the church, and you can get a copy of it from us. Two books by Miko Peled, Injustice, the Story of the Holy Land Foundation 5, who received our 2022 Sacco and Vanzetti Award, and Miko wrote a book about them. 5 Palestinian American businessmen started a Muslim charity. Then 9/11 happened, and it was closed down, and they were arrested, and 3 of them are still serving long federal prison sentences. You can find out more about them from us or from this book, Injustice, the Story of the Holy Land Foundation 5. The other book is by Miko also. It's called The General's Son, Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. On that same theme, another Israeli who lives here in Cambridge wrote an amazing book. I just could not put this book down. Linda Dittmar, Tracing Homelands, Israel, Palestine, and the Claims of Belonging. These are all books that we have available for you here at the church. These are speakers who have joined us recently. Let's see, any other books I want to talk about? Well, nope. I'm ready to hear from Sabby Sabs, Sabrina Salvati. And I will read that Sabrina is an activist, former educator, and host of the Sabby Sabs podcast. She is also co-host of the Revolutionary Blackout Network. Sabrina spent most of her childhood growing up in Germany and saw many benefits of leftist policies. Sabrina does leftist commentary and interviews activists, candidates, and entrepreneurs and other change makers fighting political and social issues. And I will add to that I'm a regular attendee at a lot of her online events and podcasts and interviews, and it's always just a pleasure to be there with tens of thousands of others who view Sabrina's regular broadcasts. Thank you, Sabrina, for joining us this morning. It's a pleasure to have you. So take your choice, cordless or cord?
Probably with the cord. You'll have to excuse me, I'm short, so. Okay. All right. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Good morning and welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming out, or those of you that are watching online as well. Today I'm going to talk about the cost of living report for 2024. Let's go ahead and get to the next slide. Just want to hit on the agenda here first really quick. We're going to discuss the Massachusetts cost of living for 2024. So we're going to start with our state first. Then we're going to dive into the out of reach report for 2024. a living wage, private equity, solutions, and then Q&A. So first and foremost, how many of you remember the '08 housing crisis? Raise your hand. Right? Yeah. Did you know that today we not only have a housing crisis, but we have a cost of living crisis? And that's what I want to dive into a little bit here today with a little bit of audience participation. Raise your hand if you grew up in Massachusetts. Oh, not everyone. Okay. Raise your hand if you moved to Massachusetts, if you were a transplant. Yeah, me too. Okay. So for those of you that grew up in Massachusetts, you can probably tell that the cost of living in Massachusetts has greatly increased, right? This is an expensive state to live in, but it's not the only one. And for those of you, if you're like me and you moved to Massachusetts, most likely you probably came from a state that was less expensive than Massachusetts. Am I correct? Where did you come from?
Kansas.
Okay, there you go. That's a big difference, big difference. So why is this important? Did you know that the recent cost of living report shows that Massachusetts has the second highest housing wage in the United States? Now, this was not the case last year. We have now bumped up ahead of the state of New York. But it's not just about Massachusetts, and we're going to dive into why there are certain reasons why this is happening across the country. But if you live in the Boston area, or if you've lived in the Boston area, I'm pretty sure you know that rent is very expensive. It's just a reality. But if we look a little bit deeper, you'll notice something else. Massachusetts, according to the Out of Reach report for 2024, the minimum wage in this state is $15 an hour. And I point that out because there is a big push for a fight for 15. We already have that here, and it's still expensive to live here. Right now, if you make $15 an hour, you would have to work 98 hours a week to afford a modest one-bedroom rental in Massachusetts. Now, for those of you that live here, that probably does not sound unusual, right? This is why a lot of people have roommates. But there's something else I want to show you. In order to afford a 2-bedroom rental in Massachusetts, you would need to make $44.84 an hour. Now, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of people that live in Massachusetts, particularly in the Boston area, that are not making over $44 an hour. And if we dive just a little bit deeper, you'll see something else. Facts about Massachusetts. Minimum wage, $15 an hour. The average renter wage is $28.70 an hour. Again, you would need to make $44.84 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in Massachusetts. But if you look at the most expensive areas, I think this is a very telling piece. Boston, Cambridge, and Quincy area. This is where the price will start to change. If you live in that area, you actually need to earn $54.37 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. Notice it increases as you go to certain areas. Nantucket County, $48.58 an hour. Easton, Renham, I have no idea where that is, by the way, $48.08. Dukes County, $41.46. And Barnstable, which I think you can't see, it's this little thing here. Let me move this up out of the way. Barnstable Town, $40.04 an hour. The problem is, it's not just Massachusetts. It's easy to start with this state, but as we dive into the report, you're going to see that this is a trend that is happening all across the country. The National Low Income Housing Coalition releases a report every July. It is called the Out of Reach Report. They have been sounding the alarm about the cost of living crisis for years. This is not something that started with 2024. The reality is that Americans have been playing catch up. A $15 minimum wage is not going to fix this. And this is why I really wanted to have this discussion, because there's been a lot of talk about a $15 minimum wage, which I think we do need to increase the minimum wage. But that in itself is not going to fix the cost of living crisis that we have in this country. First, I want to dive into what caused this and how do we resolve it. It's really important that we get into solutions as well. So as we go into this report, I'm just going to share my screen here. If you see me play with this on my channel before, this is not unusual to you. You've seen this before probably, but a lot of people have not. A lot of people don't know about this report. We're going to start with the state of California. There are a couple of states here that I do want to highlight, and there's a reason for that. California has the highest housing wage in the country. In California, you would need to make $47.38 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. We'll go into a little bit more details here. As you can also see, that the current minimum wage in California is $16 an hour. So they're above the 15 minimum threshold. You would need to make, if you make $16 an hour, you would need to work 96 hours a week to afford a 1-bedroom rental. That's California. So what we are seeing across the board, most expensive state, highest cost of housing, already over the $15 minimum wage. But you would still need to earn $47.38 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in California. And then we'll go a little bit deeper here when we get into the details. Because California, like Massachusetts, also has higher areas that are more expensive. And what is interesting about California in particular is that notice that Los Angeles is not listed as one of the most expensive areas. Instead, what you have is Santa Cruz, Watsonville, $77.96 an hour. That's what you need to make in that area to afford housing. This is insane. San Francisco, $64.60 an hour. This is going into the tech bubble. San Jose and Sunnyvale and Santa Clara, $60 an hour. Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, 57, and 58 cents an hour. Salinas, $55, little over $55 an hour. That's California. And I point out California because the danger that I notice now that Massachusetts is now number 2, California is showing you what not to do. And we are headed in that direction. But it's not just California. The next state that I want to look at is Florida because I want to prove a point. A lot of times people will see this and they'll point out the fact that it's just the blue states, it's the Democrat states that are expensive. That is actually not the case. When we go to Florida, we are seeing that Florida has the 10th highest housing wage. In Florida, you need to make $35.24 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. We'll get into a little bit more details here with Florida. Right now, the current minimum wage in Florida is $12 an hour. So they haven't reached the $15 threshold, but they're getting close to there. You would need to work 98 hours a week in Florida to afford a 1-bedroom rental. Now, this is Ron DeSantis' state, correct? This is Ron DeSantis' state, the same governor who told you that California is a problem, it's too expensive. But Ron DeSantis doesn't want to mention to you that his own state is becoming unaffordable. Ron DeSantis told police officers to move to Florida. We will pay you more money. If you live in these blue states, come to our state and we will pay you more. Ron DeSantis is adding to the problem. If we look a little bit deeper with Florida in particular, the most expensive areas, Miami Beach, Kendall, you would need to make $44.69 an hour. West Palm Beach, Boca, $42.81 an hour. Monroe County, $41.13 an hour. Fort Lauderdale, $40 an hour. Orlando, Kissimmee, this is the Walt Disney area. You need to make over $35 an hour. And the reason I point out Ron DeSantis is to prove a point. A lot of people are going to tell you that the solution is to move. That if you live in an expensive state, you need to move to a more affordable state. But Florida is the perfect example that you should not do that. Florida has become more expensive over the years because there has been an influx of people moving to Florida from states like Massachusetts, New York, Washington State, California. That is why Florida has increased. And we can also get into another discussion another day about Walt Disney as well. So that does not solve the problem. Florida used to be a swing state. I think we can all say Florida's a red state. Next, we're going to go to Colorado, and I point to Colorado for a reason as well. Colorado is not on the coast. The most expensive states tend to be on the West Coast or the East Coast, but Colorado, for whatever reason, is ranked 8th highest housing wage. So what happened to Colorado? This isn't a state that has like a huge tech bubble, which we see on the West Coast and the East Coast. We have it here in Massachusetts. We see it in California, Washington State, etc. But something happened here. In Colorado, you would need to earn $37.47 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. If we go into a little bit more details, you'll see here as well. Colorado, the current minimum wage is $14.42 an hour. They're almost at $15 minimum wage. You would need to work 85 hours to afford a 1-bedroom rental. And by the way, this is a modest rental. This is not like a luxury 1-bedroom apartment. This is Colorado. Now, if we look at the most expensive areas in Colorado, we're seeing similar patterns here. Eagle County, $44.60 an hour. This is what you would need to make. Summit County, $42.69 an hour. Boulder, $42.63. Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, $42.33. Pitkin County, $39.62. The trend that we are seeing in all of these states is that the areas that seem to have the most jobs are the areas that are the most expensive, right? This is where people are more likely to move to. If I were to make a guess with Colorado, I would assume that part of the influx into the Denver area a couple years ago, this was a trendy place to move to, could have something to do with that. But Colorado is one that really needs to be studied in particular. Now we're going to go further south. We're going to go to the state of Georgia. Georgia is also, I guess, a swing state now, but typically it was a red state for the most part. Even in Georgia, down south, 20th highest housing wage. In Georgia, you need to earn $28.98 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. If we go into the details here with Georgia, and I can explain what I think happened with this particular state. The current minimum wage in Georgia is $7.25 an hour. It is the federal minimum wage. You need to work 140 hours a week to afford a 1-bedroom rental in Georgia. If we look at the most expensive areas, same pattern. Atlanta, Sandy Springs, Roswell, $35.46 an hour. Savannah, $27. Gainesville, $26. Morgan County, $25. Butts County, $24. There have been an influx of people moving to the Atlanta area. There's entertainment businesses there. There's a lot of jobs in the Atlanta metro. But the fact that the minimum wage in Georgia is still listed as $7.25 an hour, that is not okay. Georgia's one of them. Then we have two more we want to look at. And I'm going to point to Texas, the red state of Texas, because Texas is 23rd highest housing wage. You would need to make $27.88 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in Texas. If we can go into the details here, make sure I'm hovering over this correctly. So we can look at the most expensive areas here in Texas. And what's interesting about this particular state, there's two things that are going on in Texas. Number one, there are certain cities in Texas. I believe that state has the most cities that are have the highest employment rate. So in Texas, you have Austin, Dallas, Houston is a big one. If you look up the top 10 cities where people are moving to for employment, Texas has, I think, 4 of them in the top 10. But Texas also has the same problem that Georgia has. The current minimum wage in Texas is $7.25 an hour. You would need to work 129 hours in Texas to afford a 1-bedroom rental apartment. If we look at a little bit more detail here, the most expensive areas, we are seeing the same trend. Austin, Round Rock, $37 an hour. Dallas, $33. Kendall County, $32. Fort Worth, Arlington, $31. Midland, $31. The other problem with Texas in particular has been a huge influx of California residents moving to Texas. This is causing the cost in Texas to increase. It's part of it, but it's not all of it. And last but least, we're going to look at one that people may not think to look at, and that's Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is the lowest cost of all. They are ranked 52nd highest housing wage. You need to make $11.58 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in Puerto Rico. Now, I know people are going to hear that and say, let's all move to Puerto Rico. Like, what are we waiting for? But I will explain to you why, again, that is a temporary solution, not a permanent solution. In Puerto Rico right now, the current minimum wage is $10.50 an hour. The minimum wage in Puerto Rico is higher than the minimum wage in Georgia and in Texas. Let that sink in for a second. In Puerto Rico, you need to work 39 hours a week to afford a 1-bedroom rental. And if we look a little bit closer at the details here, again, just like the other, you will see the most expensive areas: San Juan, Farado, Mayagüez, Barranquitas, and Ponce. Again, these are the most expensive areas, but look at it. $12.85 an hour, $11.85, or just over $10, $9.40 an hour. So Puerto Rico, very affordable. But the reality is, Puerto Rico, or everyone moving to Puerto Rico, is not the answer. It's not the long-term answer. You will start to see the same problem happen in Puerto Rico that you're seeing happen in Florida, Georgia, Texas, etc. So we can go back here. So getting back to this point here, what caused this and how do we solve it? We need to start with the minimum wage. The federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Remember, this is the least amount that you can pay someone by law. Minimum wage increases have been made through the states. We've had them here in Massachusetts. But according to the Out of Reach report that I just showed you for 2024, a $15 minimum wage at this point is not enough. When was the last time that the minimum wage was increased? Let's take a look at the history of increases of the minimum wage. This is from the U.S. Department of Labor. In 1996, there were amendments that increased the minimum wage to $4.75 an hour on October 1st, 1996 to $5.15 an hour, September 1st of 1997. Then we want to fast forward here to 2007, second paragraph. The 2007 amendments increased the minimum wage from $5.85 an hour, effective July 24th, 2007, and then $6.55 an hour, which was effective July 24th in 2008. And then $7.25 an hour, which was effective July 24th, 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, the minimum wage has not increased since 2009. It is 2024. So let's pretend it did. If the minimum wage increased every year since then, that would roughly put us at about $15 an hour. That's where the $15 comes from. But according to that out of reach report, a $15 minimum wage at this point is not enough. There's a picture there of Professor Richard Wolff, because even Professor Richard Wolff would tell you this is not enough. The problem with the minimum wage is that it does not adjust for inflation. So what should we be discussing? A living wage. A minimum wage versus a living wage. The minimum wage is the least amount a worker can earn by law. Right now, that's $7.25 an hour. But a living wage is based on the cost of living and would prevent families from entering poverty. We have to change our focus. I noticed throughout the years, and I'm guilty of this as well, we continue to discuss the fight for 15. We need a $15 minimum wage. But what we're doing is we're fighting for the least amount a worker can be paid. We should be fighting for more. We should be fighting for a living wage. So we have to change our focus. We have to stop focusing on a $15 minimum wage and start focusing on a living wage. And you can see in the picture here with a living wage, notice the scale is balanced. As long as we are focusing simply on the minimum wage, we're going to continue, to have a problem with poverty in this country, because again, the minimum wage does not adjust for inflation. So that's one of the reasons how we got here as a society. This country is not paying workers a living wage. And then there's another reason. There's something called private equity firms. Raise your hand if you're familiar with private equity firms. A couple people. Okay. This one kind of just snuck under the radar, because now, according to ProPublica, private equity is now the dominant form of financial backing among 35 largest owners of multifamily buildings. You could live in a building that is owned by a private equity firm and you may not even know it. Private equity firms increase rent, and oftentimes they'll decrease services and amenities, by the way. You'll see that in a second. There's a video that I want to play. If you can cue that up, Amar, to show you a little bit more about private equity and what has been happening in this country. This video, this news segment here was 2 years ago, so it has increased since then.
Rent is on the rise in cities across the country.
Tonight, skyrocketing rents forcing a growing number of Americans to think twice about where home is.
It's been making news for months. Rent is up. Rental prices increasing more than 30% in major cities across the U.S. There's a handful of reasons for the surge, but experts say one in particular is key: private equity firms. Private equity firms raise money from institutional and accredited investors, so not just from any ordinary person. Those funds are then invested in different types of assets with the aim of getting a return on investment.
A lot of these private equity-backed firms really moved into the apartment market, the multifamily market, in a big way after the last housing crisis. They also moved into the single-family market. What they do is they go out and they find these buildings. They typically make some changes quickly to try to increase the profit.
Vogel, a housing reporter with ProPublica, says private equity firms increase profit by raising rent and cutting other building expenses.
You know, maintenance, security, all those sorts of important things that people really rely on to live in these buildings comfortably.
Tenant advocates like Sophia Lopez say those money-saving measures for equity firms cost tenants.
The tenants have told me stories about having to live without working heat in the dead of winter in some pretty cold places like Minneapolis. In one case, a tenant told me a story about water that was over an electrical outlet and needing the power to be turned off, and the company telling her that she'd have to turn it off herself, which would have required her to wade through standing electrified water.
Beyond safety concerns, there's the issue of affordability for renters and home buyers. The median home price in the U.S. hitting a high of $416,000 in June, with rising mortgage rates and expensive house costs slowing home sales and pushing many to rent. Nationwide, the average rent for a one-bedroom, $1,701, while a two-bedroom is $2,048. That's a more than 25% increase since last year. As rents drastically increase, experts like Vogel say private equity firms are a main reason why. In February 2022, Vogel found that private equity firms play a major role in the rental market. Vogel reporting how mortgage finance companies like Freddie Mac are fueling the rise in housing costs. Since 2015, Freddie Mac gave billions to these firms, including real estate company Greystar.
Most of us in the industry are getting very aggressive in driving expenses down.
Here's Greystar CEO discussing his firm's ability to cut costs back in 2010.
We can drive dramatic savings out of the expense side of the equation.
But residents worry private equity firms' savings will come at a cost, pricing them out of previously affordable homes.
A lot of the tenant advocates that we've talked to also.
So you guys get the picture there. The private equity firms, they kind of flew under the radar. A lot of people don't know about it. And if you can talk to other tenants, they probably tell you they had no idea that their apartment building was owned by a private equity firm. We're going to bring up the slideshow here. So private equity is a big problem. And you'll see that some of the ones that were mentioned there, I want to show it here as well. Again, ProPublica was warning people about this. Greystar, private equity, yes. Lone Star, Starwood Capital, and then I think the other one at the bottom is KKG. All private equity. These borrowers that are highlighted white, Southern Management, and Irvine Company are not private equity. But the reality is a lot of people just don't know. It kind of reminds me of BlackRock, right? A lot of people just don't know what BlackRock is or what they do. But once you start researching, you find this out. This is why the quality of housing has decreased in a lot of these apartment buildings. This is why the rent continues to increase even during the pandemic, when there were some mayors, particularly in Massachusetts, that said we were not going to do that. We have lost control on the housing issue in this country because private equity firms have found a way to buy in. Now, this is important because when we get to solutions, I broke this up into two different sections: temporary solutions and long-term solutions. So the two problems I brought to you is we don't have a living wage. We need a living wage in this country, and the private equity firms that are pricing everybody out. And one thing I want to mention about private equity as well, again, they're not just buying apartment buildings, they're buying single family homes as well. This is why a lot of college graduates can't afford to buy a single family home. They are buying those homes, they are renovating them, they jack up the price, and they sell them to other investors. That's why it's hard for you to buy a home. So we have to change the talking point of there's not enough housing. Even if you look at a city like San Francisco, that is not the case. There is vacant housing that is available, but the city is not choosing to house people in the vacant housing. So this idea of we just need to build more homes, that does not solve the problem. There is plenty of housing, there's plenty of vacant housing that is not being used. So these temporary solutions, the first one, move to a cheaper state. That can help you in the short term. One of the pros of that is, again, you'll have a lower cost of living in the short term. But one of the cons is that an influx of transplants will increase the demand. The demand will increase the cost of living. You can look at Florida, you can look at North Carolina, and I myself have lived in those southern states that were more affordable, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and I can tell you that over time you saw the change, because as more people move in, the demand is going to increase. When the demand increase, the cost of living is going to increase. So that's a short-term solution. There was an article written by the Boston Globe recently where they were advising college graduates to leave Massachusetts and move to Michigan. And I'm sorry, that is not a long-term solution. What again is going to happen to Michigan is that Michigan again will start to become unaffordable. So we have to look bigger. Another temporary solution, earn an advanced degree. Go back to school. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard that one before. Just go back to school and get another degree, right? So the pros about that is you can get a possible salary increase. And I say possible because it depends on which profession you're in. I was in education, our increases weren't that much. So just being honest. But the con about this is that this can cause an increase in student loan debt. And the cost of living may be worse while you're in school. For a lot of us that went to grad school, you're not going to be able to work as many hours when you're not in school. So you'll have to struggle there for those couple of years while you do go back to school. And the last one, job hop. This is another one that a lot of Gen Z kids have been doing, no fault of their own, staying at a company for a year or a couple of months and then going to another company so you can get that pay increase, right? Now, a lot of times this can be a generational thing. I think sometimes like those from an older generation, they look at that and they're saying, why are these kids not staying here for longer than 1 year? A lot of that has to do with cost of living. They know that they can get a higher increase in their pay if they leave that job after a year and they're hired by another company. That's how you get the biggest increase, by the way. It's leaving the company you're at and going to another one. So the pro with that is a salary increase. The con about that, though, is, as I mentioned, some employers are going to frown upon job hopping. When they look at your resume, someone will say, why were you only there for a year? And then there's the issue of retirement funds. So if you are investing in 401k, every time you choose to go to a different company, that is also going to be an issue. In some cases, you can just transfer it over. That can be complicated depending on which company you worked at. And in other cases, you may not be able to, and they'll tell you have to cash out. We can have another discussion one day about 401k because there are studies that are showing that a lot of younger adults are choosing not to opt into a 401k because they can't afford it. But in the end, we need to look at long-term solutions. The first one is we need to demand a living wage. So as I said before, we have to change our focus. We cannot continue to just say, fight for 15 minimum wage. Again, we're asking politicians, we're begging them to give people the least amount you can pay a worker by law, right? So we need to ask for more. We need to demand a living wage. What is the method of doing this? We can do this on the state level or on the federal level. My advice, it might be easier to try to start at the states. I think we've seen here in Massachusetts, we're a ballot initiative state. We've passed a number of progressive measures here in Massachusetts because we're a ballot initiative state. So those are two different ways to do that, the method. And what are the pros? A living wage adjusts to the cost of living. That's the big one. One of the cons, corporations could increase prices. And I have to be honest with you about that. The moment they see that we are making more money, Corporations could decide, let's increase the price of gas, let's increase the price of milk. You see it right now at the grocery stores, right? So that's just an honest reality. The second long-term solution, and this is a big one, we need to outlaw private equity firms from owning housing. That is probably one of the best methods that we can use. And how can we do this? It may be easier by the state level, and you can do it via ballot initiative, meaning you can run a ballot measure in any of your states, run a ballot measure that is going to outlaw private equity from owning housing, period. Because they're not going to stop. And there's no limit to that, apparently. So that's a big one. To add to that ballot measure, in a state like Massachusetts, which is an indirect ballot initiative state, which means that these measures have to be approved by the legislature and then it can go to the ballot, we would probably need to change something within our amendment here in Massachusetts where we can overturn this idea that the legislator has to approve these ballot measures before they're put on the ballot. Because there are states like California that's a direct initiative state, they don't have to go through the legislature. They meet the petition requirements and it goes directly on the ballot. So we could do that as a combination. What are the pros? It prevents overpriced apartments and rent surges. Plain and simple. One of the cons, this will not be easy. Easier path is probably done through the states, but it will not be something that is easy to do, but it needs to be done. And the last long-term solution that I would recommend is rent stability or rent control. We can do this through the state or the federal level. Right now, I believe there are a number of people that are calling for this through the federal level because the rents are it's just ridiculous. One of the pros, again, preventing rent surges. One of the cons is you may receive the pushback from the landlords, right? Because once we do some type of rent control, that means that the landlords are going to make less money and they have people they have to pay too. So let's just keep that in mind. But these are the long-term solutions. And I've done a lot of research about this. I think that we've just been looking at this from a smaller lens. And I think we need to take a step back and look at this from a wider lens. Because in the end, the way that things have been going, this cost of living crisis, this is not sustainable. It is only a matter of time where more people are going to be evicted, more people are going to be homeless, and the cost of living crisis is a big part of that. Thank you. Okay. Oh, okay.
The right to housing. Fundamental. Thank you, Sabrina Salvati, Sabby Sabs. It's just so great to have you here with us. And we have Magpie. We're going to try to do them without any video, hoping that the mega bandwidth that video takes will make our audio signal better. So Terry and Greg, again,
Yes.
thanks for being with us and singing us these lovely songs. One more from you. Yeah.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much.
So so we're doing this without the video. That was a fascinating and unsettling presentation.
Thank you, Sabrina.
I knew nothing about private equities. PE. It gives a P. It sort of gives a whole new meaning to trickle-down economics. Anyway, this is our.
Please sing
I
along.
guess this is our answer to all of these problems.
Well, Winnie Guthrie used to write a song called Better World.
Yeah, this is a song called Build the World, and the thing is, when we wrote this song, we wrote 5 verses. When we sing all 5 verses, it's really, really, really long. So we sort of pick and choose which verses we're going to sing based on what it is we're doing at the time. But you can join in on the chorus. And
Build the world that we want to see. justice touches every land. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace. From fear we're free. False borders fall. We'll join hand in hand till the ark of justice touches every land. Where the people's will shall never fail to rout the tyrant and support the frail. Seek the righteous path of honesty, haughty of low degree. Where every soul gets what they need. No one takes more by graft and greed. Work, wealth, joy, hardship, we'll all share, and no one will yearn to be a billionaire. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace. From fear we're free. False borders fall. We'll join hand in hand till the ark of justice touches every land. No votes suppressed, no deferred, and every person's voice is heard. Rights remain uninterrupted, and elected ones stand uncorrupted. Where rule is not by stolen power, all can speak out and not cower. Where money can't defeat the choice made by the power of the people's voice. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace. From fear we're free. False borders fall. We'll join hand in hand till the ark of justice touches every land. And the noblest action is to forgive. With one another we seek accord. Respect and dignity are restored. Where armies stand down everywhere, swords finally become plowshares. Tranquility and increase when weapons of war shall rust in peace. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace. From fear we're free. False borders fall. We'll join hand in hand. The ark of justice touches every land. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace. From fear we're free. False borders fall. We'll join hand in hand till the ark of justice touches every land. Till the ark of justice touches every land.
Oh, Magpie, Terry and Greg, always such a treat to hear you every single time. And really, 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 let's make it happen to have you live here in Boston soon.
We love that.
Soon. It's been too long. It's since before the COVIDian.
That's right.
That's right.
So
It's way overdue.
So let's make that happen. The sooner the better.
All right, you let us know what dates you have available, and we'll look at our.
All right, we'll do it. A couple of quick announcements.
everyone.
The first one is for members of the church only, and we need your voice and your presence. We have a meeting on November 10th after church, after Richard Wolf. Come and hear what Richard, he will be on the screen, but be with us so we can have a meeting at 1:30. You can also join us virtually. Your vote counts virtually as well as here in person. It's not in the bylaws, but we have determined that you can vote virtually. We are deciding on a new lease for the first floor restaurant, which is our principal bread and butter to keep this place going, and we need a significant quorum to be able to make that decision, to burden us with not burden us, but bless us with an encumbrance, which is an important decision. November 10th at 1:30 is that important meeting for members of the church. Your vote is important, as is your vote on a week from Tuesday. One more announcement about an event, which is it was going to happen here, and it was a release for this book that's called Visualizing Palestine. We got a couple of complimentary copies because they were thinking of doing it here, and then they realized that it was too small a venue, and it's going to happen instead in First Parish Harvard Square, which holds about 600 people. We don't hold 600 people here, unfortunately. And that's the second Thursday of November, the Thursday before Thanksgiving, and it's a joint release with two of the founding members of Jewish Voice for Peace, who also have released a book. I'm not remembering its name. Their names are Rebecca Wilcomerson and Alyssa Wise. And they have a new book, so it'll be a joint release of those two books. I will be there, and I hope you will join us. I want to tell you also that we have keffiyehs. There's only 3 of them left, but I took them to Indigenous Peoples Day and sold about 30 of them. They went pow, 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 pow. It was just wonderful. We have this relationship with Olive Branch Fair Trade, the beautiful craft store on Martha's Vineyard that sells all products from Palestine. And they have supplied us with these keffiyehs that are made in Hebron, West Bank, and we proudly feature them on our craft table, which is out there by the window. Okay, those are the 2 announcements I had. And let's maybe have a conversation with Sabrina. Yeah? My first question, Sabrina, while you're coming up here is it conceivable that you could pass a vote, a ballot banning private equity firms from owning property? I mean, it's like we could pass a ballot banning aid to Israel, except there's AIPAC, and I'm sure there's a similar real estate lobby that is in the same position. So that's my question for you.
Good question. So yes, I think that, again, with the ballot measures, one thing we have to remember is it would be up to us, the people. So we would be the ones that would be voting on that. There is some education that would have to take place, just to be honest, because I would not be surprised if the Massachusetts legislature would try to find a way to word that to confuse people. So that would mean that it would require those who ran that ballot measure to go out in the community and explain to people what private equity is, what's happening, and how we can, how to answer that question the right way. Now, to your other point about the money, that is a very real reality, right? Like, we know that money controls electoral politics. This is why I also add that there should be another component to this, where particularly in this state of Massachusetts, this is an indirect ballot measure state. So what that means is that once the volunteers have collected all the signatures that they need for a ballot measure question, it is then turned over to the legislature, and they decide whether or not that question will go on the ballot. We need to cut that part out. So what we could do is we could try to overturn the amendment, to file an amendment to change that rule here in Massachusetts. And other places have done this, where we can change it to make Massachusetts a direct ballot measure state like California. This is why California will have 14 ballot measures on the ballot, because it's direct. So if they get all the signatures, all of it just goes on the ballot. They don't have to deal with the legislator, right? So I think it's a twofold when it comes to Massachusetts, but it doesn't have to start with this state. It would probably be easier to have that start with California, to be honest with you, because they have a direct initiative and they're able to get a lot of them on the ballot. So I think with this state, though, we would have to do two things. We would need to pass an amendment to overturn the current rule with ballot measures, which means that it has to be approved by the legislator before it's on the ballot first. We would need to change that. And then we can run that ballot measure to outlaw private equity from owning housing.
Calvin. Yes, hi. While you were going through your presentation, I couldn't help but think, well, I want to mention first that I consider myself very grateful, because 30 years ago, I bought into a limited equity co-op here in the city of Boston, just about a block away from Symphony Hall, right in the center of town. And limited equity co-ops, we own 4 buildings, 22 units, and our mortgages is a nominal $500,000 split amongst 22 different units. And I've been there 30 years, and we've only had a couple of small rent increases. And I'm just wondering, I went to a meeting some 20 years ago, and I learned that there were about 15,000 units here in Boston of limited equity co-ops. And that's a sizable number. And if that could grow somehow, if more people could gather together and buy into whether that would be an alternative.
I think that's a great idea. And this is another thing. People have proposed this idea in activist groups before about a group of people getting together. And let's say you have 50 people and everybody put in $100 or something like that. And, did what you did, went into the co-op realm. That's another option that you can do. And I think it's a little bit, I feel like nowadays it's a little bit trickier to do it here in Boston, because I feel like we have a limited amount of time throughout the year, and you guys can let me know if you feel this way too, but I feel like we have a limited amount of time throughout the year, whereas it seems like here, once winter hits, people kind of retreat. It's harder to get people to come out and to organize, etc. But I think that's a great idea. And I mean, looking back on it, it's crazy to me when I think about the cost of housing. I come from a family where my parents did not go to college. They didn't have to. And they were able to raise me and my sister, and we did very well. My mother was able to stop working when she had me until I went to kindergarten. My parents didn't have to pay for daycare. My mom was able to stay home with me until I was going to school and then go back to work. And nowadays, that is not the case for most people, even those with college degrees. So there has been a problem, particularly in this country, where it seems like you can't get by just with a regular Joe Schmo job. And you should be able to do that. You shouldn't have to go to college. But now we're seeing that even if you have a college degree, you still are struggling. So this is the warning I've been trying to signal to people, is that this is not sustainable. And it doesn't matter what politician is in the White House. People have to understand, it doesn't matter if it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. If we can't stop private equity from owning housing, this is still going to be a problem. If we can't give the American people a living wage, this is still going to be a problem.
Thank you.
Ed, welcome.
Hi. My name's Ed Pasanese. I'm a member of the community church and the board. I live in a building in Jamaica Plain for 17 years. It's privately owned, if you know what that means. They own 14 properties. And when it was created by the family, it was designed for elders and people with disabilities 50 years ago. Now, if anybody moves, it's market rate at $2,800 for one bedroom, $3,500 for a two bedroom. So they're working hard to displace people fast. And so where do people go when there's not affordable housing?
Correct. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, and this is a common situation that I continue to hear over and over. I spoke with residents at what used to be Bromley Heath Apartments, which are now the Mildred Healy. So they are, the city has decided to demolish that area, and they are just placing those residents in different parts throughout the city. It's really shameful to like take someone from their home, their community, and just uproot them and just plop them down somewhere else and say, this is your home now. And it's really sad, but that's just one example. Grant Manor is another example. Jamaica Plain, unfortunately, experienced a great wave of gentrification, and I believe that's part of the problem that you see in JP. Once the Whole Foods came in, once the breweries came in, and don't get me wrong, I like my breweries, but once those things came in, the community started to change, and it became unaffordable for a lot of people that grew up there. But to your point, where do those people go? That's a good question. What I have seen happen is that people are moving further and further away from the city. They're moving to places that are more affordable. They're moving to the North Shore, the South Shore. Even Quincy isn't really affordable anymore, by the way. So they're moving further away, which also means that they are most likely to have a longer commute. That's just the reality. The further away you move, most of us work within the Boston area. Now you have a longer commute. Some people have moved to Worcester. That's like an hour away. Like but it's that's what people are doing. And it didn't just start. I mean, if we think back to the history of Boston and we think about how like the North End at one point, it wasn't just like Italian restaurants. It was actually Italian families that lived there, right? Italian American families. What happened to all those families? Where did all those people go? They moved. They were pushed out because the cost of living increased, right? So I think you see this, you can say the same thing for South Boston. You see it in Roxbury. You see it in parts of Dorchester. It's just happening all over. And so people are moving further and further out. And this is also why for people who are not from the area, or you may have come here as a visitor, this is also why you don't hear the Boston accent that much anymore in the city. Because a lot of the people who grew up in Boston that have that accent had to move further out.
I've got one for you. Point the camera at myself. Sabrina, I have a room in the attic that's called the Museum of Obsolete Media. It has LPs, it has a million cassettes, and now the CDs are going up there, and VHS. In fact, this church, this auditorium, is also a museum of obsolete media. We have inherited a mountain of books from Bob Datilio. The third floor has another mountain of books, and you are in the universe of today's media, and you are an important what is it called? Content creator, influencer? I don't know which name you give yourself, but it's a remarkable thing to watch in my dinosaur way of approaching the laptop and clicking on you or on other similar commentators who are doing like cutting edge interviews with people that I want to hear from. I just want to have you talk about that. What it's like. What is it? Is it a livelihood? Is it possible in this new reality to make a living? Do you consider yourself a journalist, or what's the name you give yourself online?
So some of my viewers will call me a journalist, but I always correct them and say I do not consider myself to be a journalist. And even though I have written like articles here and there, is because I do hold journalists to an incredibly high standard. So when I look at someone like Max Blumenthal, for example, I consider to be a journalist, an investigative journalist, for example. So I don't put myself like on that same standard, but I just call myself a host of a podcast. Like I'm a podcast host. Some people say content creator. What is it like? It's changing every day. I can tell you when I started 3 years ago, live streams weren't a big thing. The idea was you create this little short video news clip and then you just upload those videos, right? But as time went by, live streams became more of a desire from a lot of viewers. They wanted to be able to interact with the host and not just watch a short clip and leave a comment. So I had to move with the changes. So in the beginning, I was recording videos. And then when I saw people were like, no, we actually want to interact with the host, then I switched to doing live streams and cutting those news clips from the live stream and uploading them as clips. Shout out to Eric and Corey, my producers, because they helped me with all of that. But then there's other things as well. You have to figure out what time of day to go live, which that takes practice. You just that's trial and error. You really don't know in the beginning. And it also depends on when you are available. So there's that as well. You have to learn how to do the algorithm. And that's probably the hardest part about all of this. Nobody mentors you. And I think this is something a lot of people may not understand. For those of us that started after the Bernie wave, that started the show after the Bernie wave, most of us were not a TYT affiliate, and most of us didn't go through that path or that channel. But a lot of the older left commentators did. Either they were a part of the TYT network or they were an affiliate at some point in time. So for those of us that did not go through that, there was no mentor. There was no one that sat us down and said, okay, this is how you do this, and this is how you're going to grow. There's no instruction manual that teaches you how to do this. That's the hardest part of all. A lot of it is trial and error, and trying to figure out like, when does your audience want to see you live, etc. And if you can get like that one video to really like go viral and get a lot of views, that will ultimately help you. But I think the hardest part for those of us that do the news creation on YouTube and Rockfin and Rumble is that a lot of times with the live reactions, you are going to see our actual live response. So sometimes there are viewers that may attack the host, and you will see a real response. So I think that's the other thing with that as well.
Let's do one online. Tilly Ruth. Hi, Tilly Ruth. You have to unmute, Tilly.
Hi.
There you are. Now we hear you.
Right. Okay. I live a few blocks away from Community Church. In the 1980s, there was a government program that was called urban homesteading. The building that I live in, and we bought these buildings from the city, believe it or not, for $1,500 a piece. These are from they were built in the 1870s, brownstones, and I live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit, and of course, how do you say, it's a place where my grandkids and family come to stay in downtown Boston. Okay, this was financed by the feds gave us a loan. We could use a loan for construction purposes only at 3%. The city gave us a construction manager / architect. And the provision was that we had to put in considerable hours of work. It was called work equity, which we did. It took us it was a number of years. And at the time, we were putting in $50 a month. The how do you say, applicants were screened. Should say my late husband was one who did the screening, but it was families, all races, all sexual orientation. It was quite a mix. Dean can tell you personally. He just visited me a while ago. Okay. We moved in New Year's Eve, 1984. I swear to you, I think this thing my parents and my husband would turn over in their grave, but it probably will go for over $1 million to $1.5 million on the market. Okay. Hey, yes, we are a co-op, and we also have a restriction. The restriction is that you have to live in your unit. If for circumstances, you can rent out for up to 2 years, but that's it. And that's a restriction. And we also were under the Boston Redevelopment Authority for 25 years. Of course, that time is up. Afterwards, our rules, we set up that we would voluntarily, some of us would say we had to stay affordable. So the definition of this affordable place is over 300 grand now. Completely crazy. But and we learned skills. At the time, I learned how to tile. I tiled not only with my unit, but I tiled 6 other units. Family and friends put in work hours. One family that had an elderly, the grandmother did the cooking so that on weekends we served meals for people who were working, because we were working doing this. But it took us a while. We did it, and we had to how do you say, no, I know how to cook, but others, yes, I did learn how to tile. My husband had considerable skills in terms of carpentry and using his hands and etc. But we did it, and we live in the unit, and hey, I entertain, and yes, okay, I'll confess, I'm 93 years old. I can't do too much right now, but it's been great. But we learned, this is my neighborhood, and I look out the window, and like I said, we're a couple of blocks from Community Church, and I know my neighbors. And I will say this: you have to talk to people where they are, and I'm not talking politics or political party, but like how do you say, summer we've been rented for a long time. We rent part-time at the Cape, and the landlord who owns the place is, we'll call him a Trump supporter. We do not discuss politics. We learned that a long time ago. We do talk ecology, because the weather and the global warming affects his land. And the same thing, I can talk to my neighbors. We find out what we have problems that we can deal with as a community. So stop me from talking too much.
Thank you, Tilly. The voice of wisdom, the voice of the elder of our community, and the voice of success in finding housing long ago. And I wonder if there's any similar avenues for young people today.
I think you're going to have money. The reality is, particularly we're talking about Boston, you need money. You need money with You need a group of people that are able to put their money together, or you need one person that has a lot of money. That's just a reality. My husband and I, we went through the home buying process here. We are very familiar with what it's like, and I will tell you, it is absolutely ridiculous that post-pandemic, the way that the housing costs have increased or have jumped up since then, there's no way I would be able to buy a house now in the same neighborhood. Okay, so we were able to take advantage of the low interest rates like during the height of the pandemic. But the way the housing costs now, after that, there's no way. Like, if we would have made it, I think that was 2020. So if we would have waited 2021, there's no way. That's insane. I can't think of, particularly along Eastern Massachusetts, I can't think of one place where you can buy a house that's under $500,000. I can't think of one. And that doesn't mean if it's renovated or if it's an older house or what. But the reality is, particularly with younger people, the way that they are graduating from college right now, they are not paid the wages that they need to make in order to own a home or to do the home ownership process. You have to have the money to put down for the home as well. They're not making enough. And then on top of that, the single family homes are continuing to increase. And then I also worry about this idea of everyone becoming forever renters. And I worry about that. And not everyone wants to be a renter. Some people do. But there's something about being able to have that ownership. Not only that, but that also is a part of your net worth. So if you have a home that you own, that contributes to your net worth. But I greatly worry about this idea of everyone becoming a renter, because that's actually what the ruling class wants, by the way, for people who may not realize. They want everyone to just live in these small boxed apartments. And at one point that was a trend. But to live in the tiny apartments and to just rent. They don't really want you to own anything. So in that respect, you're giving the ruling class what they want. Meanwhile, they can have multiple properties across the world.
Thank you so much. And I love this discussion of community land trust models, of the fact that we have tons of properties in Boston that are completely vacant that could be dedicated toward housing or community, and yet they're being held as investments and not put to good use as well. And I've been a big fan of yours, which is why I came out today. I'm not part of the congregation yet, at least. And I guess I wanted to ask, what motivates you to keep educating people, keep speaking out? I know it can be frustrating. It can maybe sometimes be hard to reach people or see that we're not yet doing enough to overcome that gap in power that the ruling class has over just about every industry in our society. So I would just love to know a little bit more about what makes you tick, what makes you get up in the morning excited to educate people and start these important discussions. I'm James.
Okay.
I live in Roxbury now, and I work for the city of Boston in my day job, and I worked for the legislature for a while too. And you're right, those wages, a lot of young people are moving out of Boston because we can't afford to live here.
Yeah, it's a very good question there. What motivates me? I think a lot of that just comes from the way that I was raised. I mean, my parents always, primarily my dad always pushed me to, he told me, no one's just gonna give you something just because you do a good job. My dad always told me that, from day one, no one's just gonna give you a promotion just because you do a good job. So there has to be something about you that's going to stand out to get those, those gains later on in life. But my parents taught me early on that it's really about helping people. So I've been volunteering since I was a kid. That's just kind of how I was raised. There was the Girl Scouts. I think a lot of people had the Girl Scout experience at some point, or Boy Scouts. Shout out to the Boy Scouts as well. There was the Girl Scouts. There was Habitat for Humanity. There was the Key Club. There was, all these different organizations that I was a part of. And a lot of them were through my school. So I was always taught that you're supposed to help, that's just what you do. You're supposed to help people, or you're supposed to, give back. And also part of that motivation comes from the fact that there has been some growth. There has been some improvement. I just think about where we were. Let's go back to '08. I always bring up '08 because that was the housing crisis here. I just think of where people were, politically in this country in '08, and I look at where people are now, and I hear people, are more engaged with not just domestic policy but foreign policy. The world has woken up to what is happening in the Middle East, and that's another thing. A lot of people didn't know about Gaza before October 7th, and this is why sometimes I have to tell myself to get out of my bubble, because the reality is people who are not engaged in this space, are not paying attention to independent political YouTube. A lot of times they really don't know. So like if we bring up something about, well, guess what happened in Brazil, like guess what happened with particularly foreign policy, most people are not going to know. That's just the reality. So after October 7th, when I saw the world kind of rise up and protest, that to me gave me hope. That to me gave me more motivation that, like, you know what? People are starting to wake up. People are starting to realize that we have to get away from the propaganda. We have to get away from some of these narratives that come from corporate media. Corporate media has a very extremely low rating right now, by the way. The American public, I just read the article recently, the American public does not trust corporate media more now than ever. That's actually a good thing, because that tells me that people are waking up. So I just think that's where some of that motivation comes from, the way that I was raised, but also like I am seeing improvements like through, and not even like politicians, but I mean like everyday people. I am seeing that growth. I am seeing the improvement. And also the younger generation, like Gen Z, like they really do, I think, inspire me, because I look at them and I realize, you know what? They are not falling for the same propaganda that I did. I'm a millennial. So, and we have all types of things about us, but they're not falling for it. And they're more willing to just tell you, like, we are not going to put up with this, and here's the reason why. And so I get a lot of inspiration from that.
Millennials, Gen Zs, and all us, what do they call it? Oh, boomers. Join in on Sabby Sabs podcast. Is there any specific time you've been experimenting that you do a live stream?
Yeah, so I'm live on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday evenings, and every other Sunday evening.
That's a lot of times that you can find Sabby Sabs live online. Just type in her name on your YouTube channel. That's probably the best way to get there. And she told us about Rumble and Rockfin and Rupus and Boopus and Burpus. There's all kind of platforms coming up at your way, and each one is a little different. Each one has its own set of rules, but you can find her. You can also find us, Community Church of Boston Official. Thanks to Amar Ahmad, who has really developed this in a great way. We have 35,000 subscribers and a couple of Richard Wolf podcasts or videos that have over 1 million views. Not to brag or anything, but we thank you for being here physically as well as online. Be in touch with us. We can put you on our mailing list, comchurch@gmail.com, COMM church@gmail.com is where you can get on our mailing list, or physically hear the clipboard that is going around. We also rely on your generosity to keep this thing going and to keep our staff nourished and our building from leaking, which reminds me that we just got a new roof. Somehow we were able to afford in hard times, thanks to the city of Boston and our own resources and our own donors, a brand new roof that we needed for a long time. This is the moment when hunger sets in, and when Luis starts to set a table to give us a beautiful luncheon where we will continue our conversations and think about the future of this country and of this church and this planet, and enjoy whatever Luis has cooked for us today. It's always something delicious. Thank you, Luis Guzman. And I also send a shout out to Sabina Guzman, who is Luis's good friend, same last name, no relation, and she cooks pupusas for us often, and it's her birthday today. So thank you, and happy birthday, Sabina, and thank you, and as far as I know, not happy birthday, Sabrina, who has been with us today, and we so appreciate your presence here with us today, and we hope to hear from you again soon. And all of you, and Magpie, we thank you for the music you provided for us. And we declare the meeting over. Good night, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is. Okay.